let's get this party started. Hello. I will wave back to people in chat. Excellent. All right. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with me today. This should be interesting. Should be fun. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. It'll be cool. So if some people have been following along at home, I've been doing some fun stuff with Envoy, particularly around Envoy and game servers. And last stream we sort of played around with to see how we could extend Envoy, maybe to do some neat stuff, and how we could use it with game servers. I mean, I think we came to the very quick conclusion that all the tools that we needed in the box were not in the box for Envoy for what it is that we wanted in the system. So actually, where are we? I'm gonna close some. I have so many tabs open. All right, that's nope. Don't care. I have there's a lot of stuff there. There is some bits and pieces around Envoy, around how to extend it and extend this proxy so that it can do more, or if you don't want it to be part of the thing. But the things that I think I would like to see inside Envoy for what's the words I'm looking for? I'm tired. The things I'd like to see for UDP routing and trafficking, I think are generic enough that they probably belong inside Envoy, to be completely honest with you. So, all right, you know what? Let's come over here. So what my plan was, if we pop over here, is I was gonna write a design doc and submit it as a GitHub issue as a potential feature request. I figured that's like the right thing to do in an open source context. I also have a cup of tea because that's very important for just about everything. Brains. So this is a design doc. I usually write a lot of my docs even for GitHub stuff, just in Google Docs. There's an add-on I really like called Docs to Markdown, which is really handy, that I use for doing that. So okay, so this is a format I've used a bunch. You need coffee now. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, caffeine is good. Oh man, yeah, I am sleepy. Sorry, I went back to Muay Thai this week, and I've been off because I've been sick so much in the last couple of months. So my body's now just like, oh, you should go to sleep now. The other thing I'm going to do, which I love, is I'm going to turn on voice typing so that I can do that. What was I going to do? I was going to pull up one thing that we were playing with just before, which was gedit diagram. This is my little ASCII art where we were talking about different models here. So the problem that I'm trying to solve, and let's just recap it, is right now, Envoy takes a UDP packet and will round robin it essentially to a game server or some sort of receiver on the back end, right? Which for game servers is not ideal, right? We need to specifically define, hey, this UDP packet needs to go to this specific game server. And last time we got together, we actually worked through a bunch of options. Luna was very kind on chat to talk through some of this stuff with me as well. I think maybe eventually you agreed with what I was doing, which is fine. We had a few options here. So I'll just talk through them real quickly. So one of which was potentially having some way where you could map the IP import of the sender before a connection is made. So doing it that way might potentially work. As traffic comes through, we pre-map the IP import. I had some concerns with that. I was actually thinking about this more, as networks come and go. The thought that I actually had in my head is mobile games. Like if we get into a world where if what's the word I'm looking for? If the fifth version of whatever is meant to be coming for mobile networks actually shows up, IPs and ports probably are going to cycle a lot on some more real-time games that are more mobile based. So IP import kind of freaks me out a little. I think it's a little hard to track. The other option was to have a server token at the end of each UDP packet. This would probably look something fairly similar to what we do inside several HTTP routers. You'll see it they'll have some sort of header in the HTTP, and it's this is the machine it needs to go to, and it'll route to it and do a little sticky session, and it's great. Again, so that I don't mind this. The concern that I have here is that it's very hard to revoke this. If you see that you have a player that's cheating, for example, you've got no way of being like, nope, you can't nope that. You can just nope the whole game server, right? Like you can't just kill off a player. What I like is to have a player token somewhere inside that UDP packet. I usually aim towards the end. Maybe we will make that configurable when we do our design ticket. And the system has some way of looking up what player tokens are assigned to an individual game server. And I'm guessing for Envoy, we'll call it like a downstream cluster thing. I don't know. We'll work that out. And when that token comes in, it knows how to map that to an individual game server or downstream API. Actually, you know what we'll bring up as well? With Envoy, there's an introduction. Is it architecture overview? What is Envoy? No. They have a nice terminology. Perfect. I just want to make sure I use the right words here. It is downstream. Downstream host connects to send request and receive response. No, sorry. Upstream host oh my god. That's okay. So downstream is the one that sends it. Upstream is the one that receives it. Fun. Okay. So the game servers would be upstream. Let me get that right. The thing I was actually thinking about this more, because we were talking about this the other day as well, is if we have this where we can do player tokens, we essentially have this if people just want this. Because then all you need to do is say, here's a token, so some sort of client token, or like maybe we call it an upstream token. Oh, I kind of like that. I like that as a phrase. Rather than assigning many upstream tokens to an individual upstream client or game server, essentially, then whatchamacallit, then you can do this, especially with, like, let's say a static configuration or something like that, where you could just give it a name and you'd be fine. So I think this actually gives us this, which is nice. Good flexibility. I like that. That seems pretty cool. Okay, so yeah, this is a format I've used before for doing, like, what's the word? Design proposals, that kind of stuff. One of my teammates put me onto it. If you've ever worked inside various things at Google, or you've probably seen open source stuff where it's probably fairly similar to this format, using design proposals. It's pretty nice. It works. There's nothing wrong with it. The thing that I like to put at the top of it is something along the lines of, boop. Please consider this document a sacrificial draft. Full stop. Feedback, corrections, and comments are very much appreciated. There you go. And that shouldn't be. If you haven't done it before, I quite like sacrificial draft. Feedback, corrections, and comments are very much appreciated, and likely warranted, as I am only a new user / developer, newly experienced with Envoy. I like to put that up front, right? Cool. I like to put that up because I want people to tell me that things are bad, right? This is something that I like a lot. Is very much I find it fairly difficult to get the things that the impact that I want, or the change that I want, if I come in and be like, hey, let's talk about a thing and see if we can come to a consensus. And what I find much easier is to be like, here's an opinion, let's see if you disagree with it. And I think you can do that nicely. I think that's super good. I found that's worked fairly well for me throughout my career, or just in general in life. What is the old joke that from a very long time ago, which was like learning about Linux, like this, especially back in the day when the community was not the nicest, and so if you showed up in a Linux forum and you were like, how do I do this thing, no one would ever respond, and they'd be like RTFM and like the general horrible things that you'd get, especially in the 90s. But if you showed up and if you were like, well, I can do this on Windows, and suddenly you'd have 30 people who were like, well, this is how you do it on Linux. Yeah, so somewhat similar-ish, I guess. Okay, so excuse me. All right, so objective. This is like, what are we doing, why, and for whom? All right, so the objective is how do I want to phrase this? This is actually a fun one. I like having bullet points, objective. Okay. Be able to preemptively route the UDP session to a specific upstream entry in the cluster. Route a UDP session to a specific entry in the cluster. If I've used the right words, I think I have. Datagrams to the correct game server base. So I'm trying not to say the word game server. I'm gonna put a use case section where I'm gonna talk about to upstream the cluster based on content available within the UDP packet. I'm trying to. So actually, that's a session or stream. That's a good question. So let me. No, I don't want building. Let me pull. Yeah, I want to use the right terms. That's actually a really good point. Configuration reference. Here we go. Yeah, listeners. How do they phrase it? So no, UDP listeners. UDPs. Here we go. UDP proxy. What's the phrase they use? I'm just gonna draw that across. So here we go. They call it a session. Each session is indexed by for tuple. So this is usually what I want to do. I want, so right now they have, Envoy keeps track of a client session, right? That's a thing it does. And so I basically, so what it does is rather than round robin each UDP packet individually, what it does is says, oh, okay, I'm going to look at this cluster down here, pick one of these in here and round robin like each of the cluster endpoints that we have. And I'm going to choose that for all the UDP packets to go to for your tuple of like IP and port and like where it's coming from, which is actually really nice for what we want to do, right? They have an idle timeout, and so that works really well. Rather than just being like bang, 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 send it all around, it already has sticky sessions as a thing. So that's actually really nice, which is really good. So whoops, I did not want to pull that out. I might actually drag that over there. So it already has a thing called so my thinking is what they want to really use this for, and Looney, like what you want to use UDP, I think they want to use it for quick more than anything else. And so for that, it makes a lot of sense because you're sending a quick stream. Potentially also video broadcasting. I wouldn't be surprised if it's also for that as well. That kind of stuff. Specifically useful for... Wow, I really can't spell today. Stateful endpoints in a cluster such as a dedicated game server. Use case that or actually potentially dedicated server. I think actually like SIP or like VoIP backends utilize. Today dedicated multiplayer. Dedicated game server for for multiplayer games. I usually have to say something like that, otherwise people don't know what I'm talking about. I think VoIP is similar. VoIP SIP, I think, works in a fairly similar way. Anything else I want to say in my objective here? UDP packet. For this reason, any sort of random round robin type load balancing is not effective, as we need to be able to specifically send a session to a particular cluster upstream endpoint. I'll say specific. I like specific as a term. So that they join the appropriate. Yes. It's Saturday. Spelling is optional. Okay, so anything else I want to add in here? What are we trying to solve? Calls and non-calls. Okay, that seems like a nice background. Okay, so I had a couple of things I wanted to add. Maybe something like this and something like this. Which was, there's the beginning of my Aganes, one of my Aganes talks. Do I have it on here? Where I go through more about like the background of dedicated game servers. Is it on this one? It may or may not be actually. GDC, Kubernetes one, nah, that's all right. I'm just gonna literally go to my own YouTube channel because why not? Presentation recordings, this is the one. No, don't play.
Resource
Nope. This is a nice one just because I should have given it a
resource definitions.
Shush. There we go. Where is my link? There we go. Okay. Let's put some context on that. First introductory section wherein we explain general architecture. There we go. The general architecture for multiplayer game servers. It's explained. So give some background stuff on that. The other one actually that I wanted to bring up, which was Valve GDC, which if you haven't watched, you really should. It's awesome. They had a thing called Network from memory. No. Oh, come on. Nope. Nope. It's another service. I think this is it. Yes. This is the one. Actually, I'm going to turn the sound off. Because this is also like... Yeah, perfect. This is the one. This is actually also a really good talk. If you want to look at proxies at all. This is a super... Yep. GC. That looks right. Let's make sure that goes to the right spot. Don't play. In fact, I almost want to watch this again now that I want to play with this stuff. All right, cool. Good discussion of game server proxies, of applying, actually, proxies to multiplayer dedicated game servers, and the, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? And the problems they solve, that'll do. So that's good. All right, so I think we can probably add some more stuff here. I'm gonna add some more stuff. So What am I thinking? I was thinking stuff. Okay. Oh, use cases. Here we go. Yeah, beautiful. Where are we? Okay. Oh no, maybe that's not what we want. Background. So there's yeah, I would say dedicated game servers. Game server multiplayer games. That sounds good. What other background do we want to drop here? Dedicated game servers. There's a definition in like, you know, it's really funny, and I've talked about this a lot. What on earth is that? The education that exists around dedicated game servers and multiplayer games is so incredibly lacking. Like, it's like, yeah, what background do you have here that you can link to stuff in? And like, you can't, because there's nothing. There's so much assumed knowledge. It's very frustrating. Anyway, that's just me complaining about stuff. Here we go. Perfect. Wikipedia entry. Yeah, that's not. Yeah, that's also pretty decent. What do they? Oh, that's interesting. What do you use as a? Exclamation player, link conversation, client sorting. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Oops, something dinged at me. Yes, what was that? Envoy has a decent intro blog post about Agones if you'd like. It's true, it does. But like, find me a definition of like dedicated game server and why they're important. Like it's great, but like why is dedicated game servers better than P2P? You know, what issues do you run into in P2P? Like that kind of stuff. Like just foundational stuff that is just missing. If you want to hear me rant for a while, I will go on about this for a while. It is appalling how little education there is on this stuff. One of the reasons I am now one of the reasons why I'm now an advisor on the GDC games, what is it, online game technology summit, because I complain a lot about stuff. This is the best definition of a dedicated game server in writing. That's actually probably some decent background. I'll give it that. The first section of this presentation covers. That's a bit better. Okay. We'll call it articles. I don't like documents. That works. Okay. Cool. What is UDP token? That is a good question. That is a very good question. We will get to that in a minute. This is like where we also get into lots of fun stuff. We'll get into this. Okay. We'll get into this. Okay, so yeah. So basically, actually, I'm at US. Like, what is a UDP token? I'm basically saying like UDP token is a piece of content available within the UDP packet. Maybe we can get rid of the word token in there. We'll see how we define that. We'll see how we go. Basically, there's some sort of token stored somewhere. Content available, based on content available, i.e. a token. That works. Cool. Okay. Whew. Moving down the page. What do we got? All right. So that seems like some pretty decent background. If anyone wants those links, if you want me to post those in chat, just let me know. If you want to go check them out while we're talking. All right. Requirements and scale. Okay. So like here we like want to talk about like what's the actual problem we want to solve? Who are the customers? So I'm going to what's the word? I'm going to specifically highlight game servers. The specific here we go. The specific use case that I want to cover here is around dedicated game servers for multiplayer games, but could potentially be applied to any sort of stateful system that uses a UDP stream. That got that close. The specific use case that I want to cover is around dedicated game servers for how do I yeah, that's fine. Multiplayer games, but between any sort of stateful yes, stateful system that uses a UDP stream as a communication protocol. Okay. How do I want to explain this? I'm thinking sort of just need a flow diagram or something like that. May not be the easiest way of doing this, or at least explaining the typical flow. Let me think about this. What are the things that the idea would be to extend the current extensions for Envoy so you can basically I actually do want Lua. So the question is like, so the idea would be to extend the current Lua extensions for Envoy so you can make routing decisions on UDP sessions. So while I do want Lua for UDP sessions, because right now it only works on HTTP sessions, I want it for very other things. What I also don't. I have concerns about how fast Lua is for doing stuff. Basically, what I really want is I just want to be able to say, okay, actually, yeah, that's actually good how I can answer this question. So, let's actually, what are the requirements? The things that I want to have happen is be able to assign let's say client token. Assign a set. There we go. A set of client tokens. We'll see if this. Yeah, let's see if this makes sense. Requirements. Something like this. Let's see. A set of client tokens to a cluster endpoint. Of client tokens. We'll call that a client token, which is an arbitrary string. Well, actually, it'd be an arbitrary byte array, to be honest. To a cluster endpoint. This client token is a access. It provides when passed a client token. From when a UDP packet is received by Envoy. We'll see if this makes sense. When UDP is received by Envoy, it will parse. Actually, I'll close it. Oh my god, this is fun. Okay, so what I want to have is Envoy should have a configurable way to pull the client token from the incoming UDP packet, contents. For example, the token could be the last 10, or actually like, I don't know, 100 bytes. 4 bytes of the UDP packet. We have to do this. We have to pass the token this way, as UDP packets don't have headers. So any extra information must be part of the, what's the word I'm looking for? Payload. Byte array payload of the UDP packets. Cool. When a UDP packet is received, it will parse the client token out of the packet, compare the token to the sets of, what is it, downstream client tokens to a cluster endpoint. Downstream or upstream? Upstream. Sets of token to the sets of upstream cluster endpoints. Find the one that matches. We need to, here we go. Actually, let's do this as bullet. It will pump. Let's do that. It's easier to look at this way. Parse the client token out of the packet based on the token configuration. So I think in most cases it would be the last part or last number of bytes of the UDP packet, but I'm guessing like maybe people are like, I'm just gonna put it in the middle or something. I don't know. It's fine. Parse client token of the packet based on the token configuration. Above. Compare the token to the set upstream and find the one that it matches to. If matches, if match made, configure a session. Oh, actually, I actually don't even need a session now that I think about it. Actually, I don't know. Maybe you do. Configure a session to the upstream, the specified matching upstream. The session to a matching upstream cluster endpoint. If it matches, if a match is found. Point and send the data to that, send the UDP packet to that endpoint. I actually wonder whether we want sessions at all. Maybe we don't. If there is no match, drop the packets and processing. I think that's the basic set of requirements. There's an interesting question in there about like if we're doing sessions, what happens if you send a different token? You're right. You will want sessions, Luna. You're 100% correct. Yeah, you'll want sessions because you need to know. Yeah, you said, as you said, I think you'll want sessions to send data back to the upstream based on the downstream. Yes, 100%. You're 100% correct. Yeah, you're 100% right. Yeah, because the session manages where it's coming from, not. Well, it does where it's going to, but you could always change where it's going to based on your token, but that's fine. And in fact, that would probably happen as people move from one game to another. Actually, that's a good point. If the token matches to a different upstream endpoint than previously, move the current session to the new upstream endpoint. I'm willing to bet somebody's going to want to turn that off, but that's fine. That's their problem. We can work down that from there. And the good thing is about this is like I'm like this is a sacrificial draft, so we can throw some ideas out there, see what sticks and see what doesn't. Okay, that's actually kind of cool. All right, sweet. I'm trying to decide. So, do we want to? I think so. Like I would say, like use case. Oh, I'll give it a 3. There we go. In fact, actually, that's probably better, right? These are the requirements I'm looking for. Okay. Wow, this is interesting. I think sending data back deserves a mention here. Ooh, that's a good point. Physician mentioning upstream cluster, send the EDP packet down to that endpoint. String cluster and send the configure session to the meshing upstream cluster endpoint so that data can be sent back. Yeah, that's a good point. To that data can be sent back downstream. I am getting my terms right. Let me make sure I get that terminology. Downstream. Downstream host connects to Envoy, sends requests. Yeah, exactly. So we want to send it back. Receives responses. Yep. Okay. In my head, downstream and upstream flipped, but I think that makes sense. Yeah. Is that better? So the data can be sent back downstream, back to the connected sending downstream client. There we go. Actually, let's break this down a little as well, because that'll session machine. So the client send back to the upstream packet to the matched upstream endpoint. That looks a bit better. Oy, that's fun, right? Fun. But this is good. Cool. Okay, so use cases. Actually, I would say use cases plural, because there's a bunch of stuff that we can do here. All right, so what are the use cases that we want to cover? So there's probably a bunch. One of which is reduce the area of, area of attack, or so actually I'll say can run game servers on a private network and only expose the Envoy proxy, thus reducing the surface area that is available to potential attackers. We can do that. We can have fine-grained control of who can access game servers through client token addition and removal. Fine-grained, actually like real-time, probably is a good term. Control who has access, who can access game servers and which ones. Token. This means that bad actors can have their token removed quickly. Yeah, it's gonna client tokens removed quickly. Their access to the most, critical part of multiplayer game infrastructure. All right, we can do that really fast. What else I was going to say? Sensitive? Yeah, sensitive. That sounds good. Dedicated game servers can be single points of failure. for a single multiplayer game session, and as such, are often targeted for DDoS attacks, especially dedicated game servers are usually a single IP import, single public IP import. And what's the nature of the game? I don't think it actually matters. We're just thinking through like what we can do with proxies. I'm gonna come back to what I can see some other stuff there from Fat KCA. So hold on. By enabling proxies, we can have multiple entry points, communication entry points, in which some can fail, but the player may continue playing as long as they have some proxies available. That makes sense? Basically, you could distribute your traffic from a client to multiple proxies. Actually, why don't I write it that way? Clients could distribute their traffic to multiple proxies, which is much harder to DDoS and take down, and provides redundancy. That's a bit better. Sweet. Thanks, Luna, for answering that question. Yeah, so this is a design doc for adding stuff to Envoy around UDP routing that is not specific to any type of game server. That's for sure true. All right, so reduce external resource requirements, IP addressing, and the coordination the resources require. Oh, that's an interesting point. Although IPv6 takes away some of that, but reduce public-facing IP addresses. That's not terrible. IP addresses, more of a problem for IPv4 than IPv6, but still a nice to have. That's reasons. What else was there? There's some other neat architectural stuff you can do. No apologies necessary. All good. Like you could do sort of some more just-in-time type allocation of game servers, but I don't think that's like relevant here. Basically, I'm saying like as long as you can like hand back a set of proxies to a client, you don't actually have to have a game server in the back end yet. You can cheat a little, but I don't think that's necessary here. I think there's that. Oh, we should also there's a lot of other stuff, but I was gonna say removes the responsibility. Actually, I was going to say better statistics or standard statistic reporting through Envoy's statistics collection. So like we get all that stuff, which is nice. UDP. We could potentially do tracing. Could we do tracing? There's probably some other neat stuff in there. That seems like a good thing. Clients could also make wiser routing decisions with multiple proxies exposed, similar to how Netflix clients get multiple endpoints to pull data from and choose between them. That's an interesting one. Clients could also make wiser routing. So clients already do this in most dedicated game servers. So you'll ping like everyone. Or are you talking about like doing like what like Valve does in their Actually, say that sentence in a proper way. So when you set up all your dedicated game servers, right? Like you ping them all, and you're like, which one has the lowest ping, or at least was under my service level objective for what I need for ping latency for this game. And then what's the word I'm looking for? And then like so they know which game server is always going to be like closest or within like the ping latency requirements. There is a thing that could potentially be done here in some ways, which is like if you look at if you watch Valve's presentation, which we actually linked to up here. Full stops at the end of those. They actually do like is it BGP or whatever it is? They do like network. They do network routing because inside their internal network and stuff, which is not something I want to cover here. I don't think like it's probably a thing we need to worry about, but like lowest ping and monitored throughput the session so it could switch to a better endpoint. Oh, I see what you're saying. Like if that's an interesting question. So like I suppose it depends on how close your proxies are. Yeah, it depends on how close your proxies are to your endpoint, and that probably comes down to an architectural decision. Like I'm thinking of situations where you probably were like, I usually deal in Kubernetes clusters, so like I'd probably have the proxies in like a public facing node pool, and then everything else is private or something like that. Whereas if in theory you had these in sort of edge location where it was like on the edge of like whatever your data center is, you might have more possibilities there. Then that gets into network magic, and I'm not even going to worry about that. Though it's an interesting thing. If you want to dig into that KCA, oh my god, that KCA, watch Valve's presentation where they do like BGP routing and all sorts of magic stuff in there. It's really cool. It's cool. Oh, KCA. Okay, cool. That works too. All right. Whew. All right, that seems like I think that's a good set of use cases at least to get started. So I feel okay with that unless there's anything like I feel like these are at the very least like there's way more stuff we can do, and like as we get more stuff inside Envoy that we can do with things, more potential possibilities come up as well. But this for me this particular what's the word my brain just this is like the table stakes. Like we need to have this content type routing to do just about anything with game servers, and then we can add more things. So like actually like Devi, you just brought up like doing things like intelligent dropping of low priority or high frequency traffic, or like particular response to heavily loaded servers. I think that's also really interesting. But like once we have this, the things I have a list here. Where's my list? The things I really want for game servers inside Envoy. So yeah, we should have like rate limiting, especially for game servers, right? Wherein we know, like, what the tick count is for data coming in from your game server, from your client to your game server, because that's something you define in your game. You'll be like, this happens every 30 times a second, every 60 times a second. So it's very easy to just be like, drop anything over 65, if we get like 65, more packets a second, then like drop them for this particular connection because they're doing something they shouldn't be. And you can start doing neat stuff that way. So like rate limiting, absolutely, we totally should have this. That's something this is also on my list of things that I want to see in Envoy. We were talking about Lua before. I think like Lua based content filtering. So as a packet comes in, each game's kind of different. I don't know if you want to write your whole Envoy filter, but being able to be like introspect the packet and then just be like, nope, that's not formed right. That's malicious or something like that. And you just drop it and it's done. Yeah, that would be cool. Oh, being able to do that dynamically. Yeah, I'm scared of Lua too. I want to see performance like impacts and be like, how fast could we actually do it? But something along those lines would be really cool. Maybe you don't do every packet. Maybe you're like a certain percentage. Something like that. I don't know. Like it's an idea. Like I said, it's an idea. Like something that lets you introspect stuff in an easy way. Because, I mean, the way I think of it though as well is like, I can't imagine every developer is going to write like to build extensions for Envoy. You need to bring Envoy into your own Bazel project, which is C++. I'm like, no one's going to do that. So yeah, looking at like overall packet shape, something like that, or like take a percentage, or I don't know. It's an idea. I just thought Lua would be an easier way of doing it. Then I think Lunar, you and I were talking about stuff like that. Like you could do stuff like UDP forwarding to like one or more endpoints, multiple targets, single targets. Yeah, once we start going down this road, there's so much cool stuff that you can do once you have proxies, and this is what gets me really excited. But yeah, without having some kind of content-based routing, like it becomes a moot point, or it's a moo's opinion, because it's like a cow's opinion that doesn't even matter if anyone watched Friends. Okay, all right. Whew. All right. All right. Design ideas. This is where it gets fun. Okay. So my thought here is actually more to throw like a sacrificial draft of like what a configuration would look like and what those configuration things would be. Okay, so I have people in chat who are like, I built this thing before, and it's kind of cool. Dwayne, sorry. That's purple text on black. Is it possible to provide native models to Envoy? So you can. I will show you actually how to do that. Here's a thing, sort of. So there's this. It's not the best documented thing in the world. There's a GitHub thing called Envoy filter example, wherein basically what you do is you bring in Envoy and include it as a library, and then you have like the ability to adding your own additional filters over the top. So, and then like, you build the whole thing with Bazel. Like, it's not I am definitely not a C++ expert or a Bazel expert by any stretch of the imagination, which is why I was like, oh, maybe we could do some stuff in Lua. But so they have examples for doing it. There are other people that have done it. I was actually literally just looking at one the other day for a particular company that does Envoy stuff, and I've totally blanked on who it was. And they build their own custom filters. You already built C++ with Bazel. Good for you. As far as I'm concerned, C++ is like one of the most painful ecosystems to work in. Yeah, I've had lots of conversations where I'm like, could I just build this in Rust, please, and just get it done? But yeah. You're also working for a package injection project in Rust that is parallel to this. Yeah, so like I've been thinking about and talking to people about proxies for a while, and for a long time, honestly, yeah, I was like, should I just build this in Rust? It might be easier or just better or different. I don't know. But this is also part of the process. Like, where I'm just like, okay, let's write the design doc of what it is we want to do, and send it over the wall and see whether it sticks. And it may mean that I end up writing a lot of C++, or like a bunch of us end up writing a lot of C++. That's okay too. So yeah, I prefer to lean on foundations where possible, and Envoy is doing so much of this proxy work anyway that it just seems like a natural fit, even though I really don't want to write C++. Honestly, more than anything else, I just like, this is like Bazel and C++ is like this like combination of tooling that is just like hard as far as I'm concerned. But you know what? It is what it is. And if I can get my head around it, I'm sure I can. So, all right. So let's just chuck a table in here. It's going to be easier. Boom. Lovely. This is going to be my code space. I'll give it Consolis font. So there's that. So we have a nice font. What did I want to do? No. Here we go. Yeah, that's fine. Here is our UDP YAML. So this is probably actually a good start. I am probably going to mess this up because my experience to Envoy is terrible. Get rid of that. There we go. So let's say this is a sacrificial draft for a potential configuration for the content token routing. That works. Cool. So that's all fine. Oh my god. Okay. Oh my god, my brain is like super tired. Okay, so all right, so we have this thing. We have listener filters, right? So a listener filter, just making sure I get this right in my head. That there's like a listener filter and a. Is this what I want? Yeah, here we go. Listener filters. Listener filters may be used to manipulate connection metadata. So what we want to do is build a listener filter. Cool. I'm actually quite curious whether listener filters must be able to look at content of like the incoming packet. I'm going to assume that they can. There we go. UDP listener filters. There we go. Extension. The UCS use listen to be session oriented if it so desires. Okay, that's yeah. So I'm literally just stealing the current UDP proxy as it currently exists. All right, so where'd my thing go? All right, so I will jump to the thing that I am feeling fairly. Okay, so what is the cluster? I'm gonna go down to the bottom and be like, okay, so what is the? This is my cluster. We'll call it service UDP. I'm totally okay with that. Type static. LB policy is not going to be round robin. It's going to be cluster provided, because like it's custom. Like we don't want to use any LB policy. So I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me for a moment. That's better. Okay. Is like how much of the Embark dev team is in here, or like some game companies dev teams in here? Like where is everyone from in chat? This is like very entertaining. I'm glad that people are enjoying this. Here, API. I think it's this one I want. Clusters. Here we go. Beautiful. Cluster. Lovely. I'm getting very familiar with this at this point. LB policy. Cluster LB policy. So I think cluster provided. Cluster, those load balancer type must be specified if the configured cluster provides a cluster-specific load balancer. Consult the configured cluster documentation whether set this option or not. Wow, that is a little word. Oh, you're at a cybersecurity place. Used to do games. It's amazing how many people used to do games. So load balancer. I'm pretty sure none of these will work. So I'm pretty sure we have to do this as. Cluster provided. I'm just going to put a hash here and be like, since we are providing, since our listener filter provides the routing. That's gross. I can do that in YAML, right? Oh, actually, you know what I'm going to do? Let me grab this. Actually, C-line's fine. Let me just fire up something that can actually edit YAML. Oh, actually, maybe I should open IntelliJ. That was silly. It's going to be a million times easier. Now at least I can just paste it in. Yeah, kill that. What we're gonna do, it will be like touch, so UDP routing.yaml. Okay. And then we'll just open that file in here. something like being paid. Yeah, isn't that the truth? This is, yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Maybe look at how HTTP load balancing works. Pretty sure this is similar to sending things to the right host. So I've looked at that, and you know what? Actually, that's you know what? We should pull that up. That is a good thing to do. Let me open this file. There we go. /workspace. Workspace. Learn Envoy. No, that's not what I wanted. No, that's fine. Actually, that's fine. it's going to turn into a project, but that's actually not a big deal. There we go. Okay, cool. All right, UDP routing. Sweet. Intelligent provides the routing. This will be. So I'm fairly sure from the HTTP routing, what they actually do is they do. Where are we? Configuration reference. Here we go. They do. They use a ring hash for the load balancer, and then you can provide the details in a header. HD filters. Boom, 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 boom. Filter. No. It's neat that they do Lua. I really wish they did that, and that's cool. This router consumes and sets. That's not what I want. Retry, reliable source codes, upstream canary. No, that's not what I care about. Rate limited. Yeah, there's a bunch of Envoy stuff. Here we go. So it should be connection manager, maybe route matching. Here we go. Matches a route. Use the following procedure. Here we go. Requests host. If you request host, authority header is matched to a virtual host. Oh, good for you. Virtual host. There's a bunch of stuff in it. Cool. True change transaction in order. Independently virtual cluster and the virtual host is checked in order if there's a matched virtual cluster. Okay. Can also do traffic string. Fancy. An example of that somewhere. Clusters with weights. Interesting. Virtual hosts. Don't know. Don't see anything. Do we want to leverage virtual hosts? I'm not sure. So what I was thinking. Okay, so let's see. I'm not sure. Cluster provided. That was my thought. Let's go into clusters. Just looking at so clusters have here. Clusters have hosts. Interesting. What are clustered hosts? I really wish this was in alphabetical order. Source scope type static strict DNS then hosts is required. This is deprecated. Okay, so don't use that. Okay, load assignment. Okay, that's what we do. CNS field specifying. Okay, yep, host field. Non-EDS cluster type. So that's the dynamic cluster types, which we would need anyway. Like everything's going to be dynamic regardless. So there's maybe missing something. Is this letting the client set headers? Well, we're faking headers because we don't have headers with UDP packets. We're saying that part of the packet has a token in it. That's basically exactly it. That would match to one or more, to one of the set of tokens that have been applied to an individual game server. Does that make sense to you? So cluster load assignment, I think, is what we want. The good thing is also like it doesn't have to be perfect. It's fine. Cluster name, fine. Endpoints, cool. What do we have in here? Endpoints, and so endpoints do have a priority, which is kind of cool. The interesting question is like, how do we configure, like, where do we store these endpoints? And endpoints, LB endpoints, right? Like, actually, where are we over here, right? LB endpoints. We have an endpoint with an LB endpoint. Is there a name that we can match to in some way? Well, the client, this is what we're saying, like, Debian, like, this is the whole thing. Like, it provides a token, and then the token, they don't know where the token signs them to. We're not telling them where it's going to go to the game server. We're just sending a game and the token does the routing. So it's usually like a player token. Like we're not saying go to this specific game server. Like no, you don't actually have authority in that at all. And only if the token's available or not, then that goes through. So we're not telling a game server, like you've said, it's like a really bad idea to let a client have authority. Like we definitely don't. We're not giving them authority. We're actually just saying like, you're telling us what your token is, and then we route for you. That's like, where are we? If we go into here. Right, the whole point here is be able to add, remove a set of client tokens, arbitrary byte arrays or strings for an upstream cluster endpoint. Yeah, so that's very much the reason. Yeah, no problem. Okay, so what information can we attach to an endpoint? Like, do we have a name? Where are we? Endpoints. So we have these locality, and another location with it. Interesting. What's this? Region, zone, subzone. Okay, that's not useful. Load balancing weight. Kind of interesting, but not what I think we care about right now. I think it's really just this LB endpoint that we really care about. So let's look at that. So we have an endpoint, which is an endpoint. Host identifier or named reference. Okay, so we have a name. Well, we have an address. Okay. Socket address pipe. I'm really looking. I would really like some sort of identifiable thing that we can latch onto. Metadata. Endpoint metadata. This could be interesting. Okay, here we go. Is it just a key value pair? Is that literally going to be it? Metadata. Filter metadata is a map of string struct. Interesting. Okay, metadata provides additional to inputs to filters based on match listers, filter chains. I mean, the other thing that also kind of freaks me out about this a bit as well is that we're going to have all these tokens coming in and out of Envoy constantly. And while we're doing this static configuration that is a representation of the proto spec that Envoy has, is this a good thing for like Envoy to be doing? Maybe. I'll tell you what. Then let's actually have concerns. Concerns / questions. Player tokens. I was going to say game servers or upstream / upstream client endpoints will be constantly added and removed. Actually, depends on the system. Could potentially and removed in a very dynamic way. Thousands added, thousands removed. Actually, so a single Envoy endpoint is only ever going to be able to handle at max 1,024 connections because that's like some of the top end limits it has. So we'll say hundreds added. It's entirely possible. Player tokens. Sorry, not player, client. We're calling them client tokens. Will be added and removed. Is this going to... Can Envoy handle this type of dynamic configuration rate of change? Higher than that of game servers / upstream clients. I'll say upstream clients. Upstream clients. For example, a single game session could have up to 100 players per session. That means that every endpoint upstream cluster endpoint could have its own 100 player tokens, client tokens. associated with it. Can Envoy handle this extra amount of data? Probably. I mean, it's fine. And constantly changing dynamic configuration. That's probably fair. So we would have endpoints. So, right. This is, oh, whoops. I was supposed to be doing this in here. Because, you know, it's easier to look at. Boom. So let's just say this is like hash 3 potential game servers to connect to localhost, but different ports. Right? Okay. But we, yeah, trying to make sense of Envoy's configuration. So, this part here, so this is clusters. Clusters are the upstream connections. So basically, like when data comes into Envoy, where is it potentially going to send it on to? So this is what it's called out. You can do this both statically and dynamically. This is basically a like YAML version of showing what their underlying proto and configuration thing would look like. Does that make a certain amount of sense? So that's your clusters, and then you can ignore this if you don't care about that. That's basically just where admin goes. And so here we could again have dynamic and static. We have a listener. This is basically saying, hey, we want to listen to UDP packets on 7650. And then listener filters are the filters that can inspect what information is coming in and then route accordingly. And like, so here it's like saying, okay, so we have a UDP proxy, and then we're going to send all our traffic to this specific cluster, which is service UDP, which is right here. Let's actually rename that, or we'll call that. Can I do that? No. Service UDP, we'll call it game servers cluster. Just you know, nicer. Interesting that a cluster here has a load assignment, which has a cluster name. I don't know. Why is that all the way looping around? But whatevs. So what I'm trying to do is like, okay, so say what I'm trying to do is like how we define all the game servers that we have. So we have these endpoints. We need some way of being able to like uniquely identify each one of these. They have address and ports. Those should be unique. I'd love to give them names of some kind. I can't think of a better way of doing it. I mean, ooh, is this a terrible idea? The terrible idea that I have is that we use metadata to store the tokens in. I do not hate this. This actually might be a nice way of doing it. So let me come back in here. So yeah, I'm actually kind of liking this idea. Yeah, I'm kind of liking this idea. So where are we? So we have an endpoint that has a metadata. Metadata specific values may be used by the load balancer to select endpoints in a cluster for a given request. Actually, generic concern with the tokens at the moment. They're super easy to sniff. Since UDP datagrams have the token in it. I agree with you. That is a good point. One of the other things on my list of things is being able to do encrypted endpoints using Envoy with a key and a token that you can then send through. That would be ideal as well. And then you could do per connection types of crypto type stuff, but one step at a time. I also don't know anything about UDP crypto. I know there are standards. We should probably support one of them. The other thing that I'd like to kind of see too is like being able to put the Envoy proxy on the client side. Mapping to host port fixes this also without reading crypto. That is true. That is true. So as long as we keep supporting that. Yeah. Don't have a good answer for that. The flip side of that is like host port. I think about mobile clients a lot in how much they change networks, even within an individual game session, and how much that's probably bad. If you're doing that, there is... there is a bunch of stuff out there for like securing UDP traffic that I am not there. And also like I know like Gefron Games has a thing, and like there's DTLS for datagram layer. Like I don't know anything about that. Yeah. Hiccup than a regular daily. Yeah, so I like you're like for console and PC users, yeah, you're probably not going to get an IP change very regularly. If you're a mobile user, you might switch from 3G to Wi-Fi at the drop of a hat. And your game experience shouldn't drop, but it would. And that's not good. So that's sort of what my thinking is at. And as we get more mobile games, like that's a thing. So I don't. Yeah, exactly. Like it's all trade-offs, right? Well, I'll tell you what. So I will write the design doc for this implementation. And feel free to add comments on it as well, especially like all these concerns, which are completely 100% valid. And maybe we can also add in something as well for like if we want to do IP and port mapping, and we'll have a bunch of, and we can just keep rolling it through. But I yeah, 100%. Like I don't think nothing is perfect. I wish it was. That would be great. Because I also like the thing I was thinking of is games, UDP, crypto. Is that what I'm thinking? Where are we? Yeah, it should only be 2 to 5 packets to re-up you with your new ID. Hey, who are you? Yeah, so like the other thing that could be interesting, and because it's session based as well, you could also be like, you don't have to send the packet every time. Like once the session's been allocated to you, you could just be like, no, I don't need to send this anymore. I don't know. WU, so it should only be 2 to 5 packets to re-up you with your new ID. Hey, who is this? Yeah. So here's an interesting question. So say you went, what's the word I'm looking for? Say you went with like IP and port, like port mapping, like where it came from. How do you know what that is? How do you know what that is without receiving an individual packet already? Right? You can't preemptively map that because you don't know what the sending port's going to be. You can only map it when you receive your initial packet, though. Unless I'm missing something. Yeah, so like you can't, like... Oh, this is the thing I was thinking of. You map on first packet during the start of the session, but like you don't know how to send it to the game server if you don't know, like how do you, the first few packets would need to deal with, so you need to send a token. you would need to send a token so that it can do the mapping, which puts us back right where we started. Right? You would always have to send something. Right? Like this, basically, we end up basically exactly where we started, right? Like you have to send a packet with a token so we know who the player is. So we can do the mapping to the stream, and then like we're in exactly the same place. You don't like there, yeah. Like what, like how, like I don't know. Unless I'm missing something, which is possible, I suppose. You need to have some identifying token in a packet. Yeah, so I think you're right. So we could whatchamacallit? Why don't we say something like, and I think that's like you're saying, like you only have to do it at the beginning. I think that's reasonable. I think that's totally reasonable. The interesting question is how we communicate that back. Because we kind of have that here, in which UD packet is received by Envoy. This does mean that if a client hops from one network to another, it needs to be aware of that hop, but fine, like we could do that. Like when we come in here, so UD packet received by Envoy, parse a client token. If a match is found, this gets like, no, and I 100% agree with you, and like sniffing is useless and that kind of stuff, but I'm like, this gets insanely complicated too, right? Like, how do I know if I'm sending a new packet because I want to reauth? Do I need to have a byte about whether it's a reauth or not at the end of a packet? How does that work? These are all good questions though. So you know what I'm going to say? I'm going to say, let's stick with what we have for now. Like I said, this is like sacrificial draft. I really like all these questions. At the end of, like, in this stream, I'm going to put this on the Envoy GitHub as a design doc. Like, I'm just going to paste it in there. So like, let's drop all those questions in there and like hash it all out, because probably that's a better place for doing that. Than probably me talking to the chat in this here now. This is not the final requirements. Actually, but you know what? Actually, this is a good point. We have a thing in here called concerns questions. Let's actually make, let's make a section in here, because that's, is there a way we can do this without sending the token on every request, since it may not be encrypted? The token is easily why UDP? That is a good question. Scrapable, can be seen in traffic. Mostly, yeah. I'll let Luna. UDP for things. UDP for game servers. If you ever want to go down that, actually, is his website still up? It is. Bam. That's the article you want to read. Yes, the connection for the proxy explicitly needs to be UDP. 100%, no question. Yeah, no, it'll always have to be UDP. 100%. No, it's not even like, it's not like non having UDP is like a deal breaker for most games. But actually, that's a good question, and we should put that in the background, because that's actually that is actually useful information to have for this conversation. Why UDP is so important for real-time multiplayer games. Thank you for asking the question. That is good to have. Anyway, we can do this since it may not be encrypted. The token can be seen in traffic. Maybe we could only send the auth, the token on initial request / network change. Or maybe we need to also have encryption. Something like that. So there are some games that are multiplayer that use TCP. I think people have mentioned World of Warcraft before. I'm fairly sure. World of Warcraft is actually TCP, which is interesting. But it's the rarer version of the two. Most real-time multiplayer games are pretty much all UDP. But yeah, that's good. Yeah, send the token agent request, something like that. Right? There's some stuff to work out there. Yeah, that's come up a lot. Okay, so we'll need to change this to something else. So this will be our listener filter. So this is our UDP. They've called it UDP proxy. We're going to call it our UDP router. And we're going to say UDP router config. Cool. Oh my God, I keep doing that. UDP router. UDP router config. That's what I'm just going to call it. I think that seems like a reasonable name. All right. So, yeah, I like this. Let's put, now, oh my God, I keep doing that. Come back here. It's a different tab, not a different workspace. Here we go. Endpoints, common types, metadata. Okay, so a metadata is a map of string struct. Interesting. We're in here. Okay. Struct is a map of string values. Ooh, so this could be interesting. So bear with me. So we have endpoint metadata. Endpoints metadata, which takes string values. How do I do? Okay, so we can basically pass in whatever we want. Let me think about this. So metadata, core metadata specifies the values that need to be loaded by the load balancer. The filter name should be specified as envoy.lb. Example boolean is canary, yada yada. So filter metadata is a string struct. So we could do something like UDP router. Something like that. Which could take. Really, we could actually just tokens. That is probably terrible. If someone can think of something better for that. And then we could just store our tokens here. So like X7ZWSY. Or something like that. You don't like that. Why don't you like that? It's duplicated. Oh, yeah. This is the client tokens are stored in the metadata as struct key values. That's not terrible. You're not getting work done. It's Friday. Like it's the last Friday of, whatever year we're in now. There's no point in getting work done. I'm running a design doc. This is all right. This is work. This is work for me. Struct key values. Couldn't each endpoint have its own list of tokens? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. Exactly, 100%. So each endpoint would have its list of tokens, and these are different tokens. So that's a 9 and a, Why do I keep using X for things I don't know, but I just do? Maybe you only have 2 tokens, because then that's less. You know, I don't know what the standard is here. I'm sure I'm going to get ripped apart when I put this up, but something like that, right? Like maybe this has 4. Right? Something like that. Not sure why this is a map. Okay, so it's a map because filter metadata is a key, like takes a string with a struct, and a struct is a map. So a struct is a map of string values, and that's just how it works. Also, it'll mean because it's a struct, it's really easy to look stuff up. So it'll be fast to do that. So I just store 1 in there. We store, yeah, like we just, I mean, it's easy to look up. It's easy to look up keys in a hash map, right? It's basically a set, right? Like that's what we're doing. Using 1 as a dummy value. We need to store something. We could use true or false. We'd be like, if you set it to false, they can't get through, but I just figured you might as well delete it. I don't know. What do you think? Should we do that as like true or false? Yeah, I'd have made the values of tokens a list as well. Actually, I probably wouldn't. I probably would have made it I still would have made it a map because then it's very fast to look stuff up rather than having to loop through a list of 100 items. But I mean, 100 items is not that many, so it's fine. Yeah, so you can dynamically reconfigure at runtime with Envoy. You have 2 options in which, whatchamacallit, that you can either do static configurations like this, or you can have APIs that do like, that can do, whatchamacallit, like do full configuration, just like here's all my configuration. You can also do delta changes as well. Again, that's sort of one of my concerns as well, where I was like, hey, this is data that's going to change like really, really, really regularly. Is that something that Envoy can handle? I don't have a good answer for that either. So I put that in the thing. Should this be true or false? Maybe we should make it true. This no longer has access. Actually, I think maybe I like that better. How do people feel about that? Then you can disable access if you want without having to delete it. And so you could always go back and look at it if you really wanted to, which I like that. If true, or avail, and if listed, check key values. Yeah, the tokens. So in my opinion, the tokens are whatchamacallit. The tokens are provided externally, so that's kind of on the user to provide the tokens. I'm expecting that most systems have player tokens of some kind. I don't think it's on Envoy to be providing these tokens. We're just going to be the recipient of the tokens. So I will leave that on there. And like, I'm just trying to think per Envoy. So we have how many Envoys? So like we're probably dealing with 1,000. Like we can only max out at 1,000 game servers to be supported by a single Envoy instance anyway, which is that's a whole set of other problems. So we're only going to have a maximum about 1,000 endpoints. Actually, how many items are we talking about here? So we have like 1,000. So 1024 times say 100 players. So, and it's like 100,000 items. Like, we're not talking about a lot. So going through all of these really quickly, like, I don't think that's a big deal. Especially, I think you're all 100% correct in that, like, we probably don't want to be doing this in every packet. Clearly, we just want to do the initial set and then, like, just keep an eye on it. Or the other trick is you're like, you don't have to loop through every single time. You just have to have a cache where you know what's been, like a cache with a map, which is like, this is what's been out, this is what allowed, and this is what isn't, that kind of stuff. So you could, there's probably some stuff we can do here to optimize this. I think that would work pretty well. Yeah, so I'm like you bring up like different like you're like depends on scope a lot too. 100 players for some games is a lot, for others not as many. Oh, actually no, per game server, like 100 players per game server is kind of the top end. Um, like it's not 100 players for an individual game; it's 100 players for a game server, right? And so that's where I'm thinking like how much data we could be potentially having in here that's changing all the time. There's a whole other interesting problem here as well of like coordinating the set of Envoy proxies that you have for all the game servers you have, but that's a whole other thing. Okay, cool. Good, excellent, perfect. That becomes a whole other fun problem. When true, the token has access, when false or non-existent, access denied. So, oh, and I can't spell. What do you? Oh, passive voice. Fine, whatever. Okay. This is not terrible. Don't mind it. Yeah, so like games like Eve, Dual Universe, etc. that having out that like have hosting larger and larger player counts, they still have separate dedicated game servers though. And then you like get into game server meshes and like all that kind of fun stuff, and it becomes like an interesting thing. But they're still, even if you're just bifurcating, is that the right word? Bifurcating, like splitting up your large persistent world space into multiple game servers, you're still maxing out. Like I still haven't seen, at least in my perspective, more than 100 players per game server, even for large persistent worlds. So I think it's an interesting question. Again, like even if we went out to 1,000, like we're still not dealing with like massively huge numbers, or like 200 players per game server. Like that's still not. Yeah. So does a few thousand on a game server? Okay. But it is, yeah, that's a whole thing too. Yeah, and then I mean, there's like, okay, actually, what to your point is like, rather than talking about like simulation game servers, now when you start getting into more like lightweight game servers, where like you could potentially have like really where you're more doing kind of relaying or just very light simulation, where like that's actually a common thing that has come up a lot, and that's a really good point. I mean, at that point, I feel like you're just going, we just need. Actually, you know what? Let's throw that down as a concern. That's a fair comment. Yeah. Could have potentially thousands of players per endpoint. Huh? Yeah. No. You know what? That's legit. That's legit. Yeah. Like that's why I'm like, let's put that down as a concern. We added a much higher rate than upstream clients. Let's actually make that separate. A single game session could potentially thousands of players per endpoint. And like this is not just game servers, so maybe there's other use cases where it's to it. Yeah, 16 bytes per packet ID could be insane quickly. That's a whole other thing too. Yep, nope, that's true. Game station potentially thousands of players per endpoint. That means that every upstream cluster endpoint could have thousands of client tokens associated. Can Envoy handle listener data? Yep, client tokens we add and remove much rate the upstream of that of upstream endpoints. Right, like we're gonna do like 1,000 per individual one, right? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, if there's a good way wherein like we initially send a token and then like we don't have to send it anymore, and like how we do that, we pass that information back. I don't. Well, actually, you know what? We do. And this may be out there. I'm not sure. but I mean the Envoy proxy is non-transparent, right? So we whatchamacallit, we don't expose the outside world. Like the traffic goes through Envoy backwards and forwards. So in theory, we could also append something to a returning packet that when it comes back to say, hey, we've set up a session. You don't need to send us this information anymore. But then, like, how do we know when to stop? Like, you know, there's like, this is a tricky problem. I don't, yeah. Is there a way we can do this without sending the token on every request? I feel like there's got to be prior art here. What makes this harder is like we can't be that opinionated with it. Having a default route sets up in Envoy fixes this problem. To UDP mapper service, but like, how does that solve the problem? You don't know if the sender is going to be the same sender to that service. If the packet ends up to the mapper, it initiates auth, but where the tuple includes the sending port, which may be different for the game server. Do you know what I mean? Unless I'm wrong. How do you ask the sender? Like, how does the sender know what its sending port is? Yeah, I don't. I mean, there's something I don't know about, which is entirely possible. Like my UDP knowledge is not the best. Yeah, see, they do like actually this is maybe actually a really interesting one too. They use the same thing that Quick Protocol does for that sort of stuff as well, for encryption. They do per packet encryption, which I actually quite like as well. So, I'm not sure. I'm gonna go with I'm not sure. This might be interesting as background. I might chuck it in background. Is this good for background? Maybe. Yeah. I think it's a good question. We should have a call about this offline. Yeah, that'd be great. Or like this is a conversation that should definitely happen on the GitHub ticket. I feel like this is like totally like something that should be. This is exactly the conversation that should happen on the GitHub ticket. And I have a strong feeling what will happen is I'll post this on Envoy. They'll be like, "That's great. We should have a GVC about this," and like we'll make sure that everyone who wants to be on the call is on the call. Because it's an interesting, tricky problem. Yeah, there's a few people who do like this is what Steam does for encryption. It's basically designed on Quick Protocol, so maybe we could do something like that and build that into how Envoy works. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, we need to start. We also just need to start somewhere. Okay, so let's throw this in here. Oh my god, I keep doing that. Copy. That's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's fine. Sacrificial draft content token routing. This should be. Whoops! No, don't change that. This should be. New type of router. That's better. Oops. Oopsie. I just overwrote the whole thing. Which is not what we wanted. I'm sure there'll be other people. All right, sweet. Alternatives considered. Doing straight. Being able to somehow preemptively map directly to sender, or to preemptively create sessions based on sender IP port information. Couldn't at initial pass couldn't find a way to implement this. Also with games on mobile networks, especially. Network changes could definitely are far more frequent than PC consoles. What other things did we talk about as well? We had being able to provide a token that identifies the backend, the upstream cluster endpoint specifically. This does not provide any extra security. What's the word I'm looking for here? Get back to the office. Oh, okay, cool, Luna. Thank you. I appreciate that. 9% your current design would work perfectly for my wanted mapper approach. Okay. All right, cool. Run through it at work. All right, let's see if it works. I'm down. I'm always completely open to feedback. This is a potential security concern, as oops, I can't spell. Yeah, that's a good point. If you network change, you have to reauth anyways. Otherwise, attacks involving dropping a user and taking their session are a joke. Yeah, that's true. Although they have token, maybe? I don't know. This seems reasonable. Maybe worth discussion. As any client with the upstream cluster token endpoint has access, and you can't revoke it. In reality, with the current design, you could do this anyway. If you wanted to, simply wanted to by using a single token per endpoint, at which point it becomes a user decision. I currently miss a way to set a default fallback endpoint. Why would you ever want a default fallback endpoint? Not a terrible idea though. Like, where would you send people if you're like, this is the default game server? For the mapper I mentioned, 97% sure current design would work perfectly for my wanted mapper approach. The mapper service can then reply, hey, you got black hole, please reauth. I mean, do you need it? Like, at that point, it's like, if I'm not getting anything back after a while, you're just like, oh, this didn't work. Maybe. I would say let's chuck that idea in the issue once it goes live, which will be very shortly because I think I'm pretty happy with where this is at. I don't personally have a use case for a default endpoint, but maybe other people do. It's an interesting idea. Basically, I'm like, well, if you don't get anywhere, like, you're gone. Like, you don't have a token that it, like, authenticates. Like, you're out. Like, end of story. Like, bye-bye. Oh, I see. For the mapper, you're saying, like, this is where it should go if it doesn't... but it has to be part of Envoy, though. It's just a matter of allowing star as a token. Oh, like having it in, like... Oh, I see. So basically, you could be like, here is an endpoint that accepts anything. Oh, yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So, like, I see what you're saying. Okay, got it. So, yeah. I'm actually wondering whether you could do that with a separate cluster. But I do like that idea. I feel like that's at the very least that is very flexible. So let's do that as an option as well. Let's do the last one. I think I can use star as a thing. No, I can't, but I can do that. This allows a connection from anyone, from anyone / token, something like that. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure I've seen star in yeah, no, I have. I've definitely seen star. I'll tell you where I've seen star. Is that what I want? I'm pretty sure you're right. Let's just double check that because introduction. No, it's fine. Getting started. Sorry. Quick start. Run an example. Proxy. Boom. Yeah. So you might actually want to do a separate cluster. Would you want it? So here's an interesting question. Yeah. So domains is like star. That's just an array. So star is fine. Would you want it? That's an interesting question. Would you want it to be a separate cluster with a different, where you would have a separate listener filter, which is listening on a different port? You're giving an attack straight true false. Is this a real token and bleeding information? Through a pure fall through like that would actually be dangerous because it could be used to map all the active tokens. Oh. Well, the other way that Luna, this is an interesting question. Would you want what's the word? The port value to always be the same for what it is you're talking to? Because what you could do is have a separate listener that's specifically for the mapper service that's just doing round robin stuff. But I guess once you're talking to a different port value, then you're on, like, you have a different session, and that's probably not what you want, is what I'm thinking. Is that sort of what you're... Yeah, I think you'd have... Yeah, if you had a separate listener, you could basically use what you have right now, like what actually works right now. So maybe we get rid of the star. Maybe we're like, star bad. Let's not have a star. Let's leave that alone for now and like see where the conversation goes for Envoy. I don't think the upstream session... Yeah. You know what? I feel like I should have put the chat in my window so people could see what we're saying, but never mind. Too late now. Next time. Yeah, let's ponder on it. Let's leave it alone for now. I think this is a good sacrificial draft. All right. So, are we ready to dump this on the world? I think we are. And can we always change it and like let it go and like here we go. There we go. I feel like maybe I should have thrown the chat room over here somewhere. Oh well, next time. Okay. Oh my god. All right. You know what? Let's submit this and like get it in before the end of the year, and like we'll see what happens. Okay. Envoy. Issues. Yeah, I think we should talk through it some more. We should talk through. I mean, once we had this, and then we were like, hey, we want to add a star. You know, like that's not a big deal to add to this as well. Or if we were like, no, it doesn't. Like, I'd rather like, yeah, exactly, right. Like, let's get the initial version, and then we can always add to that. Okay, let's see what we got. Bug template config. No, it's not a bug. Bam. Yeah, actually, I think my guideline is actually the best. Sweet. P. Gonna do this feature. Where did it go? UDP content token routing. Probably not the best title in the world, but I can't think of anything better. Does anyone have a better title? I'm very unconfident in this at the moment. In what, like, how could it be better? Like, the interesting problem here is like, how do you solve these problems generically? I do appreciate the fact, that you were like, you know, you spelled confident first and then accidentally was like, no, actually, I'm unconfident. Like maybe we do need some sort of auth system beforehand, but I don't know. I don't see what the concern here is. Behind Envoy, handle anything even remotely session-like. Well, yeah, I mean, like Envoy is not providing tokens or doing any of that stuff. Like I assume there's some system that's probably tied to your matchmaker that does all this work of like saying, hey, this is like a person and they're allowed to connect and this is what they're allowed to connect to. Like Envoy's not doing any of that. So I'm not not sure. I'm not quite sure I understand your concerns. And Envoy already has UDP sessions. Like that's the thing that it does right now. All right. Well, you know what? If you find words, I'm going to submit this. Please put them in here. And you know what? We'll adjust as necessary. This is where we write design docs. This is literally the whole reason. It's so that people can come up with ideas and people can like start to break them down and we'll make the best thing that we can make. That's kind of, you know, the whole point, which is good. I have an add-on. Let's do docs to markdown. Boom. Markdown. There we go. Really? Objectives an H1? Demote headings. Do that. That's better. Yeah. Yeah. I understand. Like there's probably a lot of stuff that I don't know, and this is sort of like some forays into here. That's good. I'm glad it did that. Here we go. Just want to drive down here. Concerns, questions. Here we go. YAML. Get some nice. There we go. Now that's looking pretty. All right. Thinking a lot of concerns have been fixed by using 128-bit tokens. Yeah, which we can do if we don't repeat them in every datagram. Yeah. I think that's a valid point. Again, like that's where, like some of this I'm like, is kind of on the user. Like the tokens are up to you. You know, use what you see fit that works for you in your game. I don't think that's up to Envoy to decide. Cool. I'm hitting submit. Let's see what happens. Let us see what happens. All right, I will chuck that link in chat too if you want to subscribe. That seems like a good first pass. Yeah, you can't make Envoy do this work. I don't think it's the job of Envoy. That, to be honest, Envoy is entirely out of the realm of the average devs. Yeah, I feel like this is like the first layer of a control plane that runs basically like a proxy service for Envoy. Basically, like it's like we need something like an Istio but for game servers, that sits on top, and maybe that has, you know, token creation and like, but like, and all this kind of stuff, and like all like how do we separate out, like how do we orchestrate this across a cluster for all these game servers based on player count, and like that's a whole other beast of stuff that definitely needs to happen. Yeah, and then like yeah, there's so much cool stuff. Exactly, right? Like you totally need a KX controller. You know, I work for Google Cloud, and so like we have OpenMatch and Argonis. Like you would want that controller, like I would want that controller to be directly integrated into those things as well, or at least have plugins or something like that, so that like when a game server goes down, like an endpoint goes away inside this, and like there's a dynamic configuration. Basically, you need a dynamic configuration control plane, which Envoy supports. Like there's a whole control plane thing for it too. So there's so many layers here still to go, like, but we just need some of these basic building blocks to get some of the basic stuff working. I think this is like just a really good first step. So anyway, yeah, and then you know, when you start building some of those foundational pieces on top, then you can start to get more opinionated about stuff and like start laying that stuff. It's just, yeah, as you know, you can't. I feel like, especially if you're working inside a studio or like in a particular company and you want to be really opinionated about a stack, like that's relatively easy to do in some way, shape, or form. But as soon as you start stepping into like open source like this and like and stuff, you have to be kind of generic about it, because there's so many people using this stuff in so many different ways, with different requirements, and it becomes really fun, which is kind of like the fun challenge, I think. But then you can start, you know, layering stuff on top, you know, and you can start doing stuff like, you know, Istio on top of Envoy, you know, and then on top of Kubernetes and like all that kind of fun stuff. So, you know, but I think, you know, it's good. I think it's really good though, Devin, that you're bringing up these points about the security things and things that could potentially go wrong, because we don't, what's the word I'm looking for? We don't want to make sure we put ourselves in a corner in which like we've suddenly we're like, oh, this security problem we can't solve anymore because we've like messed this up. So that's super useful. So I super appreciate you spending the time and putting that stuff in there as well. So yeah, thank you. So thank you for everyone who's actually come on board and is talking about this stuff that's really interesting and useful. So yeah, but like, yeah, I would love, like I threw a link to this in here. So if you have extra thoughts and concerns, please put issues on there. I want to see it. I want to see this taken ripped apart. I have my ego is not attached to this, I promise. I have thoughts and feelings and opinions, but they are definitely weakly held. So, and I'm very curious to see like what the Envoy the Envoy community are gonna be like. Where did this come from? Where's this crazy person coming from? Or the person with these wild ideas. I'm wondering if they're just gonna be like, nope, we're not doing that. Which I'm hopefully they won't do, because I think there's a lot of stateful UDP workloads out there that need this kind of thing, and it'd be useful for a bunch of people. But yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting too. I think we'll. I want to find some people who do like SIP stuff, like to like voice over IP type stuff, because they've come and talked to me as well about stuff that like trying to run a Gonez for it, because the pattern's the same for game servers and orchestration. So what's the word I was going to say? So I wonder if they have similar requirements or potential other types of issues that would work for them, or maybe would also work for us. So, diversity of backgrounds usually leads to cool things. All right. It's 4:30 p.m. here in San Francisco on the last Friday of the year. So like, I'm done. I think that's a good end for the year to see what happens. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Follow me on everything. So my dog's doing stuff. It's 1:30 a.m. and you stayed up. Oh my God, that's way past my bedtime. Thank you, Lena. That's lovely. There's my dog. Go to sleep. Follow me at Neurotic on Twitter, Mark S. Mandel on YouTube, Mark Mandel on Twitch. I'm really enjoying actually doing all this streaming of this interesting stuff that I've been playing with Envoy and see what happens. So yeah, super exciting stuff. Otherwise, yeah, Luna, go to sleep. Everyone else, thank you for hanging out. Thanks for the great conversations. Hopefully we get some great conversation here on this ticket, and we'll see what happens, and we'll just keep on building and see what happens. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I will see you all in the new year.